Leadership is all about ownership. In order for you to be a leader, you must be willing to take 100% responsibility for everything in your life. Not just the good, not just the bad, not just the things that are sexy, not just the things that are beautiful, but the horrible things, the bad things, the moral failures that you go through. You got to take 100% responsibility for everything in your life if you're going to actually be a leader. And that's one of the things that I've learned years ago.
All right, so we are back with another episode. This time, me and Jay has a guest on intentional movement. We have the one and only Torrian Scott. Toran is a leader of leaders. He is a man of God. He is a business strategist, and he is just here to share some wisdom and be in a good conversation. I've known Toran for years now. I mean, over a decade.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of private conversations. He's part of my council as well too, a man that I go to and have a conversation with. And so, welcome to Intentional Movement.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you so very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah.
Like I've never been here before, but in the space. But in this particular space with you two, it's a pleasure and it's an honor.
Pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
So today, the topic that going back and forth with you on is ownership and leadership.
Yeah.
One thing for sure, even in my personal life and in business or whatever, more so at this moment in my personal life, it is the ownership aspect or whatever, right?
Right.
It's taking the accountability, it's taking ownership over the decisions and things that you've done, but also how do you lead yourself to a better place? How do you then become a better person in that space as well too? So I know you talk to leaders from different levels and places around the world as well too. I know that's a conversation that me and Jay are constantly having as well too. How do you lead yourself to new places and new levels? And so definitely want to hear your take on that.
Yeah, man. Well, yes, leadership is all about ownership. In order for you to be a leader, you must be willing to take 100% responsibility for everything in your life. Not just the good, not just the bad, not just the things that are sexy, not just the things that are, beautiful, but the horrible things, the bad things, the moral failures that you go through, the pain points that you go through, the little envy, the little stress. You got to take 100% responsibility for everything in your life if you're going to actually be a leader. And that's one of the things that I've learned years ago. I grew up, my story is my father actually started the family business when I was 10 years old. I remember it being 10 years old because I wanted to be on the couch watching Saturday cartoons and Power Rangers and, He-Man and all those different things. But he was like, nope, we're going to get up. We're going to actually go and wash some cars. We're going to go and mow some lawns. We're going to do whatever we got to do, because him and his particular level of leadership, he knew that he had to do whatever he needed to do for the family.
I would like to say that definitely my father was definitely that type of father as well too.
Right.
He was solutions first, actions, then figure out the rest, or let me lead by example. So I was getting up, early mornings on the weekends as well too, either going to go play tennis or going to go do some other task or whatever that he wanted me to kind of like follow along with as well too. And so seeing like an example of leadership at a young age, how do you think that kind of manifested into ownership for you in the different areas that you started to endeavor into?
Well, that's a good question. Because my dad was an entrepreneur, because he took the initiative and actually created a life for us in which we could actually enjoy life. We didn't have to, grow up in, the gutter or whatever the case is, where he came from or where my mom came from. We actually had a better life, but it was because they both took ownership about where they wanted to go in life. I think, let me back up a little bit. Beyond my father and my stepdad, of course, he came into my life, but he's my dad. You know what I mean? Like, even though my biological father wasn't in my life, he was my dad and still is my dad. But I gotta go back to my mom, if you allow me to do that real quick. Let me backpedal to my mom. Mom had me when she was 19 years old. And her and my dad, biological father, of course, liked each other and all those different things. Didn't work out, but 9 months later, here comes this deep, dark, chocolatey epidermis. You know what I mean? And my mom growing up, of course, she was one of 8. And so my mom had this determination about her that she was going to do something, that she was going to be someone. And I remember my mom working at Sonic. Now, have you ever been to Sonic before?
Oh, yeah.
At Sonic, footlongs and all the different stuff, right? She was
Slushies.
Sonic, right?
Yeah.
My favorite item there was tater tots with cheese with
Oh
ketchup.
yeah.
Still bangs today. I mean, it still slaps today. I mean,
I can't do too much of the cheese nowadays. but
right,
yeah.
right. I mean, I don't have it every day, but
Yeah.
but the reality is, I remember her working there. But then she had this vision for her life. Like, I know that I'm better than this. I know that I want to go further than this. So she started working for a grocery store, and she worked at Kroger's, basically,
Okay.
kind of like it's like Ralph's out here. So then she said, I want a better life for my family even more. I want something better for me. So there was this new sporting goods store that was happening in the actual city of Houston. And I was called Academy Sports and Outdoors. And so she applied to be an apparel associate, working 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, basically folding clothes, $4.10 an hour. That was minimum wage back in the day, right? And she said, you know what? I want to be better. I want to have more. I want to grow. And so she began to personally develop even more, said, I want to be a cashier. So she worked her way up to a cashier. She said, you know what? There's some more place for us to go. I'm going to go to that next place, which was cashier supervisor. Soon after that, manager. Then after that, an opportunity opened up in the corporate office, and she began to actually apply herself, applied for an opportunity, and she just celebrated 35 years on the corporate side of the actual business that she started in. And what that brings to me is that wherever you want to go, you must take ownership.
Yeah.
You got to take ownership in the leadership that you desire for yourself, for your family, and for your community all around. But it really takes you understanding that ownership is leadership.
If you had to break down the concept of ownership, right, to an individual where they want to accomplish great things in their life, right? Do you focus on the task or the person?
Man,
Where do you begin?
You begin with the person.
Okay.
You got to begin with the person, because the reality is you are the foundation for your success. No matter where you go, you take you with you. So there's a lot of people that want the accolades and the accoutrements of success and notoriety and all of the accolades and all of those great things. But the reality is that you got to be you to yourself first. Before you can ever start leading anyone else, you got to start with you. So if I was to break it down, the first place that you got to start is, number one, is your identity. Your identity. You must know who you are. You have to be okay with diving into the nuances of who that is, because by the time we start discovering ourselves, someone's already told us who we are.
Yeah.
Mom's already told us our name, and dad's already told us our name. Our society's already told us our race or our political standing or our economic standing. But you have to find out who you are. And you said that I'm of course working in the church and all of those great things. And so when it comes down to that, for those who are really truly looking, you got to start with this question: why was I created? Who am I?
Yeah.
Like, who am I? There's 3 questions that a lot of people are still working out. And every person in the world has these questions. Number 1, who am I? What can I do? And where am I going? Those 3 questions. If you can answer those questions for yourself in confidence and clarity, you're on your way, to some level of success in whatever field you're actually going into. But you got to get an understanding of who you are. So your identity. Number 2, you got to understand, what can I do? What's my potential? What's put on the inside of me? So once again, I'm going to talk from like a biblical standpoint. And, for those who read the Bible and everything, I love reading the Bible because it's so deep. Like, it's absolutely deep. Just the first chapter of the Bible, one of the things that God says, he says, let us make man in our image and in our likeness. And then he blesses them and he says, go be fruitful, go multiply, go replenish the earth, right? I always ask this question, Jay, like, why didn't he say go be seedful? Why didn't he say go be seedful?
Yeah.
He said go be fruitful, which means that a seed already exists on the inside of me to go and produce something for someone else, right?
Right.
And we all know that fruit is not for the benefit of its own tree, it's for the benefit of whoever else is going to partake of that tree. And so you got to ask yourself, what is in me already? What are those desires? What are those interests? What are those irritations? What are those things that are in me that I just it just won't go away. I gotta find out. I gotta take ownership of developing that part of me.
I love that. A question is like, question that I have is, once you've already developed and gotten to a point where you are fruitful, right? What, especially individuals that are coming from environments in which the environment wasn't fruitful, but they clawed and grew themselves out. They took extreme ownership, and they got to the point where now everybody's eating off of their fruit, right? What about themselves? What happens when they get to a point where they don't even know what they need because they're so used to being fruitful for others?
Well, see, every tree has to go into hibernation.
Yeah.
There's no tree that produces year round unless it's GMO, right? That's genetically modified. And there's a lot of genetically modified leaders out here that feel like they have to produce. I gotta produce. But you gotta take that rest. And that's the reset that a lot of leaders, you see this burning out. Like right now, we see a lot of leaders falling out, right? We can drop some names and all of those different things. Just over the past couple of weeks, some mega names, big names, dropping like flies, dropping in because of moral failure or whatever the case might be. I would venture to say is because they felt like they had to continue to produce. I have to, otherwise, who am I, right? Otherwise, where's my life going? If I don't continue to produce, if I don't continue to be this for that person, if I don't continue to pay that person's bill or be that person's savior or be that person's counselor, who am I? Well, we go back to that. You must know who you are, because if I know who I am and I know what I can do, I know that there's times where I need to retreat, I need to reset, I need to get rerouted so that I can actually produce more fruit.
Yeah, and I think that that's where escapism and sedation creep in.
Absolutely.
Because they're looking for a way to escape what is, because they're unable to communicate or they're unable to understand what's actually happening. And I know all of us have fallen into that aspect. So then at that point, what does that individual need? Like, what do they need to refuel? Not just the, kick up their feet, relax, take time off, whatever. How do you communicate to that individual, hey, it may not just be a time off, maybe you need to be poured into. So what is that pouring into? Where does that even begin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to say, you need a safe space. Every man needs a safe space. You need a place where you can take off your armor. You need a community or a confidant. You need somebody that you can actually say, hey, I'm hurting, I'm falling apart. I don't know what to do. Like, for instance, me, I've always had some level of counsel in my life. Scripture says that the multitude of counselors, their safety. So I've always had maybe one or two people that I could just say, hey, I don't feel myself. Hey, man, I'm falling off. I'm falling apart. I think that every leader needs that, a safe space, because you always have to be Superman, but you're really Clark Kent, right? Your real identity is Clark Kent. The Superman is for everybody else, but the Clark Kent, in order for you to actually receive love, in order for you to actually be loved, and be loved to someone else, you have to take off the cape, because if not, everybody's just going to gravitate to your strength. And I hope that I'm making sense. I don't want to talk so much in allegory, but you need a safe space where you can be Clark Kent, where you can take off the armor, where you're not Superman, where you can say, I'm hurting, where I am falling apart. And that confidant or that community should be doing the pouring in. They should. That's why we created Lions Leading Lions, because we recognize that there's a lot of men that are isolating in their issues. They're isolating, sedating, whether it's, going to the gym too much, or, hypersexuality, or, they're gaming all day, whatever the case might be. But you need that place where men can pour into you, or that leader. You need that place where another person that has skin on them just like you, and say, hey, what's going on? And that will just listen, just listen to me, just hear me. and maybe you don't have any answers. You know how many coaching sessions I've had in my executive coaching strategies. Many people are like, man, you're such a great coach. I didn't do anything. I just listened. I'm just listening to these leaders, top CEOs, top, executives. I'm just listening. And one of the great things that they say is like, you're an amazing listener. I don't have anybody that just listens to me to understand.
And I think that comes down to it's a number of things. And Jay, it definitely hop in whenever you feel the water's warm enough.
I'm learning. I'm taking this in. I have a few questions too. Like, one of the problems I have is being vulnerable enough to go to these safe spaces, because I feel like maybe my problems are just my problems. I don't want to bring it to someone else, or kind of like it's hard for me. Right. So that's something like maybe taking a step towards that. Have you had somebody like that before? Have you guys had somebody, or how did you approach that when you had to be vulnerable?
I think the first it comes down to, because we all do it.
Right.
It is the somebody asks you how you're feeling, and then you edit your very response. Right. It's like we were just talking about this. Is you somebody says, "Hey, AJ, how you doing?" And you say, "I'm good," or whatever. You filter that, but what you really want to say is, "I'm just falling apart. Right. Like I'm falling apart. There's too many pieces to put back together, or whatever. Right. I'm just picking up the pieces I got and just moving as much as I can before the next piece falls." Or it's the fact that, okay, the world tells you in certain spaces that you don't have to be Superman, but don't you dare take that cape off. And so it's that aspect where you take ownership for so many people and things around you that you don't take ownership over your own self and how you're actually feeling.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's hard to communicate that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I still struggle with it today,
Yeah.
especially now, dealing with the clientele. As I was growing my business and talking to others, much greater space than I am, it's hard for me to switch. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yep.
It's hard to switch into that mode.
Yeah. You just have to find someone that you trust.
Yeah.
And you just have to dive in. Like the way that I learned how to swim, much like probably you learned how to swim, you got kicked in that deep end. Yeah. Swim, you know what I mean? And for some people, that's the way that you have to do. You just have to dive in. You just have to find someone. So I'll tell you this story. 2-3 years ago, it's 2024. So 2021, I decided to do a sabbatical. And that's my very first sabbatical. And I went on sabbatical for like 6 weeks straight. No teaching, no talking, no coaching, no strategy, no nothing. Just absolutely no pouring out. But I needed someone to pour into me. And so I found, of course, I have great people that are around me, but I needed somebody that I could go in every single solitary week and meet with. So I just randomly called a church that I respected and said, hey, I'm a pastor. I'm going on sabbatical. I just need to talk to somebody. I just need to talk to someone. I just dove in. I didn't know the person. I didn't know the guy or anything of that nature. But when I went in, and I talked to this gentleman. His name is Nico. I can call him. He's my friend now. But the first, I just let it all out. I just said, hey, man, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm thinking. Here's some of the things that I am, struggling with, and I don't know if that's good. I don't know if it's bad, but here's my stuff. You know what I mean? And I think that you just have to be able to find somebody that you trust, or find a confidant that you trust, or a community that you can trust, that is not going to, air your dirty laundry.
Absolutely.
Seen as weak is my biggest issue, because I grew up,
right.
Boys don't cry. My dad was a hard ass on me, and slapping me, and it kind of like, so he kind of instilled that in me. So I always pride myself in being, a provider, a great provider, a great parent, a great, a partner. And it's one of those things that if I do open up, it's like, what are they gonna think of me? I'm weak for doing so. I don't know.
I think in that you have to find your counsel where you're afraid to lie. because and then you catch yourself, it's like, why am I even lying about this?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I'm going through something right now, right? And
Yeah.
I got in there and I'm talking to Torrian. He's like, "Oh, what's going on?" I'm just like, "Yeah, I messed up." And he's like, "Oh, what'd you do?" And I was about to say something. He was like, and then he asked me again. He's like, "Oh, so what'd you do?" And I was like, "You know what? I'm just gonna look. I messed up. There was some casualties. I took extreme ownership for it or whatever. But the reality is that you still messed up."
Yeah.
And now it opens up the conversation of like, okay, so how do you feel about this? Like, what's going on? What's the deeper cause root of this, right? Now you're opening up a space to really express yourself and just release as well too. And think about it is coming into a space where you're not afraid to take off the mask and show that you are the villain in the story.
That's good. Yeah.
You're not the hero. You're not trying to be the hero in the story.
Right.
You are the villain in this story.
Right.
And the reality is that you need to own up to it to fully get everything out. Because the thing about it is, I grew up in a very similar environment, as you. I didn't grow up with my father. He died when I was 9. And for me, growing up in San Bernardino, as you know about it, it's just like, it was just that, everybody's trying to prove they're tough, who's the toughest one around and stuff like that. But as I got older, I started to realize that, the boys in that environment, they were just boys that had emotions that were immature.
Yeah.
And so they were trying to, they didn't really know what was calling them to want to be like the boss or the alpha in the pack or whatever, and it happens when you're an adolescent, but then it happens again when you get older as a man, and you're just like, there's this thing that's pulling me, there's this thing that's telling me, like, I have to be more, I have to build, I have to make this kill. But you're unable to process, because you understand the materialistic aspect of it, but not the emotional side of it.
Yeah.
And then you have you have what I call is like the higher self, your alter ego aspect. So my alter ego, he is like, he's him. And every time I want to like feel something, or I can't even get like a tear out, whatever, he's like, "Don't you do it. Don't you do it." Right? So it's like, it's walking in that balance of like, will this moment of weakness define me, or does everything else that I've done define me? And but then also that gets you in trouble with your integrity as well too.
Yeah.
I think that as a leader, as a man, as somebody who's being a pioneer, like for instance, the guys that I talk to, they're pioneers. They're the first in their family to do whatever, whether it be graduate school, whether it be start a business, have a family, whatever the case might be. Like, they're pioneers. And I say you got to be okay with understanding that no one can hurt you. Goggins is big on his, book, Can't Hurt Me. Yeah. But you really have to have the mentality, like, there's nothing that you can say or do that can actually hurt me. Why? Because I take ownership for my own stuff. So you try to embarrass me, embarrassment is a choice. I'm only embarrassed to the degree that I need your approval, and I don't need your approval. So if I don't need your approval, if you can't hurt me, I can be vulnerable. I can say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with, because I know, just like you, I'm a man, and just like me, you're a man. So whatever, your stuff may not be my stuff, but you got stuff, I'm just willing to talk about it. Yeah. And so I had that opportunity to talk and just pour out and just, man, get healed, and get a perspective that I never was able to get. And I was able to go back and produce more fruit, because I took that season of just shutting it down, being quiet, not pouring out, being selfish with my time, saying no to a lot of things, especially things that are time wasters. My coach used to say this, Coach Al Hollingsworth, I love that man. Yeah. He says, ignorance is old fashioned. It's old fashioned. Like, you could be ignorant in the early 1900s. You could be ignorant in the late 1800s, but we got Google now. Anything that you're asking me, you can go Google it, in order to find it out. So I had to find out where my value was going, and if it wasn't valuable, I had to say no, and that's okay. So But yeah, you got to get back to the point where like you can't hurt me. That's how you open up. That's how you start sharing with people. And you have to have that person that's willing to go deep with you. You know, not everybody can go deep with you. Some guys are just like, or some people in general are just like, you know, well, man, sucks to be you.
I always change my mentality to okay, I don't want to be seen as like the negative Ned. So I'm like, okay, wait, this is just a mentality. Maybe maybe I need to switch that thought into something positive.
Yeah.
And that's how I deal with it. And then I just kind of, that's really just putting a lid on it and keep it inside. But which I know it's not good.
But you know what? I'll say this before I learned, you know, where my spaces were and stuff like that. You would see online, or you would see it like some of these conferences or events or whatever, where there'd be a guy that would get up and he would just pour his heart out and talk about like how he's feeling and everything else too, right? And there's that part where you're just like, dude, I wish I could do that, right? And then there's the other part of me, right? The other part of a lot of us where it's just like, you shouldn't have done that in this open space. You know, this is more of a private conversation, right?
Yeah.
And so that dynamic, it's bred by society, but also it's to understand. Because I always say this, whatever, right? I think it's right in saying for little boys shouldn't cry. Let me tell you why. But I feel as if you need to add something to it. It's like you can't just tell somebody not to cry, but show them how to release it. Because as men, we know that, okay, when we're feeling hurt, sad, or whatever it is, like we default to violent things.
Yeah. Whether
Whether it is ourself, we take it out on ourselves with sedation or whatever, or we take it out on others and project that stuff or whatever it may be. And because we're not necessarily built to process at that large scale. Now, but once you start getting some reps in, you start to understand that communication, not just externally, but also internally as you talk to yourself, then you start to really get a handle on what you're actually feeling. Then you're able to communicate it. Because it's not that you don't know how to feel your feelings. Because you can do some dumb stuff, whatever, guess what? You're going to feel those feelings, whatever.
Yeah.
It's the aspect of being able to communicate it. That's where the reps need to come into.
So this is where I'm going to push back on you on. I will tell. So I have two boys.
Yeah.
So I will say it's okay for you to cry, but don't be whining.
Yeah.
You know, like for instance, my son, he loves football. My youngest son loves football. I mean, like the very first time he told us about his dream to play football, I mean, he's 8. No, he's 10 now. So he had to be like maybe 5 years old. So an opportunity was coming up, you know, the next season. And he says, please, it's my dream, you know? And man, when I tell you, when I saw my son for the very first time in flag football get on the line of scrimmage, and he put his mouth guard in and he got on the line of scrimmage and he was in this stand, I was like, look at this kid. Like, this really is this dude's dream. So he's passionate about this thing, man. He dreams it. He believes it. He eats. I mean, he loves it. So in this new season that he's in, he's been playing for a couple of years now, but in this new season that he's in, he's not able to get as much playing time because of the dynamics of our schedule right now. On Sundays, we have church, and then, you know, the church doesn't get out until a specific time, so he's missing like half of his game. And so, you know, this last game, he got there about maybe about 30 minutes late. So, you know, it's already kind of almost over. So he didn't get a lot of playing time. I'm talking about he is crushed, absolutely crushed. He's crying. He's saying, they won't put me in and, you know, and everything. So I had to pull him to the side. I said, buddy, I understand where you are. I understand that you're passionate. I understand that you're hurting. I understand that you're disappointed. And that's okay. And this is good for you to express that because he's 10, you know, I mean, like he's supposed to, what is he going to go hit the weights? You know, like, no, he's supposed to actually express that, but communicate it.
But you're teaching him how to release.
Exactly.
Whereas a lot of, and so this goes back to what I was saying,
Right.
A lot of people, they just shut down the emotions.
Absolutely. They shut down their emotions. They get pissed. They get mad. They go to the bar. They drink. They give the silent treatment. They do all. I mean, we've all done it because if you're in our generation, which I say generation 40 and under, the reality, or maybe 20 to 40 at this particular point, the reality is that no one taught us how to be emotionally aware enough to be able to release in a way that is productive to you yourself and to whoever else is involved in your situation. You
Absolutely.
know, it's always, you know, we go back to the default, which you said, violent situations, or because we don't know what to do, we just do what's most natural. And sometimes what's most natural is damning, you know, to us.
Absolutely.
So.
And I think one of the other things is, you know, growing up in the environment that I grew up, it's the whole, especially if you grew up in a household where you were like the younger boy, right? Or you were the only boy, and then surrounded, and then especially growing up, you have a single mother, you have your older sister, you have older sisters and stuff like that, right? So you start to see how all these women start to release their emotions. Sometimes it's crazy. Sometimes it's like, sometimes, and then you, because that's your home unit, you tend to take on a lot of those traits as well too.
Absolutely.
And so it comes down to, it's like a lot of people don't have fathers like you. A lot of people don't have people that are speaking those things and helping him, because when you do that, you expose them to a new truth.
Right.
But also you expose them to the truth, and questions come from that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people want to grow and, you know, take ownership and be able to express their emotions and stuff like that, but they don't even know the questions to even ask themselves or even where to begin.
Right.
And so it's not just, like you mentioned Google. Google's only useful if you know what you're looking for.
Right. Right.
You know?
Right.
Other than that, it's just like, okay, I'm feeling this way. Okay. Articulate it.
Yeah.
What does that make you want to do? Like,
Right.
Why is that feeling there? Is it because of an action, or is it a reaction to something?
Right.
Like, how would you describe yourself? You know, that's why a lot of people gravitate towards horoscopes and stars and all these different things, because it's telling them what they're feeling.
Right.
And if it hits the right thing, they'll align it, like, you know what? That's why I'm feeling that way.
And then they take on the identity.
They take on the identity.
So that's why, like I said, you need confidants and a community. Every leader needs confidants and community. That's your safety net. That's your safe place. And if you don't have it, you're bound for a crumble. You're bound. I mean, it's just, you're ticking time bomb. Something's going to explode. Something's going to happen. Something's going to implode. Whatever, something's going to happen. But if you were to have that confidant and that community, you'd be okay. Some people that you can be, and you have to choose to go deep. Now, there's people that I've opened up to, and they couldn't feel, and you kind of like drip on them a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, you don't just
a little
give
bit.
It, like,
you don't. No.
Here's my deepest, darkest secret. You know what I mean? Like, you test them. You test them a little bit just to kind of see where they've been, what they are, what their response is, if it was helpful to you or not, and if not, you know, then you just kind of move on. That was something that, you know, you really can't hurt me with. You know, you can't hurt me at all. But that's minuscule to what I'm really dealing with, the dragon that's in this closet right now. But you just gotta find it. You gotta test it out, and that's a part of ownership. You gotta take that ownership. You know that in order for you to be an effective leader, you must have a confidant. You must have a community. Every great leader had a confidant or a community. Every great leader. You can go back all the way to historical figures. They had a confidant or they had a community.
I think for me, I guess a story that kind of puts it, because I think a lot of people can relate to this as well too. You want to change, right? You understand that you have messed up, right? And you want to change. And for me, I remember when I was younger or whatever, I was just terrible in my early high school years, right? I was definitely the black sheep, and I began to want to change, you know. And this is why I believe that people truly can change if their intention is there, and the reason why the drive is driving them forward. And they're willing to go through whatever to get to the other side of that.
Right.
So I was a black sheep family. I was doing all this crazy stuff, whatever. And I was always talked about in the negative light and everything. And for years, when I started to change and stuff, I never went to my family or anybody. I never said, look, I'm changing. Look at the work I'm doing. Look at all I never did that. I just arrived at a point where the conversation around me started to change.
Right.
Whereas it was like, I didn't do it for you. I did it for me.
Right.
Because I didn't like the result that I was getting, and it
good.
no longer served who I was.
Right.
So for a lot of people that want to take accountability and that are looking to change, and the situation is so jacked up and so messed up, it's like, don't wave a flag every time you do something good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wait till you finish, or wait till other people say, you know what, there's the finish line.
Right.
You've changed.
Yep.
I've recently come to that conclusion in my life right now, and you kind of know a little bit about this, but in my last relationship, I was always waving a flag like, I'm changing, I've changed, I've done good, like, look at me, like, I'm changing, pay attention to that. And that's one of the reasons why it didn't work out, is because she was hanging on to the past. She was hanging on to my faults and the errors I made. Me wanting to become better and put myself in your world, Rasheed, and being that, success circle, made me want to, okay, who do I have around me? Who's my counsel, and who am I following? What can I do to copy them, right? And one of the things is changing, inner self, right? Which was something I was ignoring.
Right.
And but going back to that is, I was always waving a flag, and I came to realization most recently, I shouldn't be doing that. That's funny you say that. I shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it too is, this is the other thing, going back to the intention. If you're gonna start that journey, like, you gotta, excuse my language, but you gotta eat shit. Like, just eat it.
Yeah.
Eat it. You gotta be prepared for what you'll have to intake and take from, because you have to realize, whether they had years of you being bad, or you messed up majorly that one time, guess what? You messed up majorly regardless.
Yeah. Right.
And it doesn't have a time frame or whatever. It's that weight of what you made that person feel.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, but before you even begin that journey, you have to ask yourself, are you willing to begin this journey where there is no end in sight?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what you have to be willing to go the distance. You got to be willing. This is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not something that you get, well, I guess at the end of your life, I guess you can get a medal or so. But, throughout it, I mean, it just change. Just be that guy. Be him. Like, release the applause. Like, one of the things that I always share with guys, like this. So I love my relationship with God, right? So, because he's been the father that I never had. And he told me that years ago, when I was experiencing letdown after letdown, in father figures or mentor figures, just getting let down. I remember I was leading this group in college, and I was leading this group in college, and it was very successful. We had these amazing events every single solitary, not every weekend, but like every so often, maybe twice a year. We'd have these big events where all these college students will come from all these different colleges, and they spend 3 days, they get free, absolutely, just understand purpose and all those great things. Well, after one of these things, very successful. I mean, we had people like laying their guns on the altar, like condoms on the altar, cigarettes, pills that they were going to overdose on, like on the altar, like just giving it up, like saying, I'm done with it all, right? And man, I was like, I'm a real great success right now. You know what I mean? Like, I'm very successful right now. And one of the leaders who was attributing, to the success of the weekend, they began to talk about the success, and they began to thank all of these different people. They thank this person and that person, the audio person, this person, that person, this person, that person, and they did not thank me. I'm the leader. Why you didn't say my name? You know what I mean? Over the loudspeaker. Why didn't you tell me? Like, I went back to my room. I'm talking my dorm room, pissed. I'm like, I am straight up. I'm mad. I'm crying. I'm like, I quit. I hate this, because I'm in college still as a full-time student, and volunteering as a leader of this college ministry for like 300, 400 kids. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I don't get any acknowledgement. I don't get any. And I remember God just speaking to me in that moment and saying, son, looking for a thank you from man is like looking for a drop of rain in the ocean. You're never going to find it. He said, but if you continue to do what you do for me, I will never forget the love that you've shown towards me in serving people. He said, I will never forget. I will never forget what you've done. And ever since then, I don't look for no thank you. I don't look for a pat on the back. I don't look for anybody to pet me. Oh, you're so good. You're so great. I don't care, because a person with a changed heart doesn't look for applause from men. They look for applause from God.
It's true.
And that's scripture for anybody who wants to go back. That's Romans. That's Romans. A person with a changed heart looks not for applause from men, but applause or praise from God. And ever since then, that's it.
And it's never ending. The validation that you seek from people is never ending, and you may get the wrong validation from individuals as well too.
Absolutely.
And that drug it'll lead you down certain paths.
Yep, that ego is not your amigo. But the reality is that we all have to do that work. Understand no one can hurt you. No one can embarrass you unless you let them embarrass you. If I need approval from you, then maybe I can be embarrassed. But if I don't need approval from you, you can't hurt me. You can't embarrass me.
So I have a last question for you.
Yeah.
So, Torrian, I've messed up so badly. I've created a situation for myself that I can't get out of, right? Where do I begin? Especially when those that were affected won't accept an apology.
Oh, man, I've been there.
Yep.
I have been there. So in college, once again, going back college days, we were talking offline, dating 8 or 9 girls at the same time. I mean, absolute just rambunctious. I mean, and we were talking about, how in that particular, I didn't know who I was. And so I was searching for different little small things in different women and kind of Frankensteining this perfect woman for whatever my own selfish reasons. But it wasn't until I really got an understanding of purpose. A mentor of mine used to always say this: if you don't fulfill your purpose in life, God will allow you to live long enough to see your replacement. And that phrase haunted me. I mean, it absolutely haunted me, because I knew that I had a purpose. I knew that I had something that I was supposed to do. I knew I had something that I was supposed to build. I knew I was supposed to become someone. But the reality is that my habits, my emotions, my lack of emotional awareness, lack of spiritual discipline or physical discipline or whatever the case is, just absolutely was not allowing me to become who I know that I am. And so what I had to do is I had to own my stuff. I had to own my junk. I had to own the fact that, okay, you are being a fool right now. You are being, and I needed someone that I could tell that to. So I called a confidant and I said, hey, I'm falling apart. I'm not my best. This is what I did. This is what I've done. This is how many times, and this has been going on for this long. And that person just listened to me. And then they poured into me, and I was able to be vulnerable with that person. And I remember just like it was yesterday, I was on my roommate's bed just crying. I mean, I was in my dorm room by myself, but I was just crying and just welling for what seemed like 2 hours. And after that, I made a decision. I said, okay, I'm going to do right by God. I'm going to do right by me. And then I'm going to do right by other people. So I had to break up with all of those girls. I had to let them down, not even easy, just, hey, it's over. I'm not going this way anymore. I'm done. Some of those girls just absolutely hate my guts to this day. They did not want an apology, even after years of me, taking ownership of myself, doing the work on myself, or whatever the case might be, married or what. They do not care. They hate. I don't know if they still hate it, but they hated my guts, and they didn't want nothing from me. And guess what? I had to be okay with that, unfortunately, because I can't go back and I can't make it right. I can't. The only thing that I can do is say, hey, I apologize. I was an idiot. I messed up. I was a fool. I was a loser. So that's all I can do. I can just own my stuff and tell you who I was. Exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah.
I'm saying, yes, I was. But beyond that, I can't do anything more. Like now that's where they have to take up ownership and say, okay, what am I going to do with that apology? What am I going to do with that admission of guilt? Am I going to forgive or am I going to stay stuck in bitterness? But I can't do that work for them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I can't take ownership for your junk. Like I can only take ownership for my stuff and become a better person and take what I've learned, take what I've felt, take what I've allowed others to feel on this journey of leadership with me and say, okay, and make a decision. I don't want other people to feel me intentionally feel like I make other people feel.
So, final words for you. What is next for you? What is the intention of your next move?
This next move, you're not supposed to tell people your next move. So you just got to
What's
stay
the
tuned.
intention? Give me the
Okay,
intention.
the intention.
Behind it. Yeah.
The intention for me is to be the man that I've been looking for. I remember sitting with one of my mentors, had a room full of people. Somebody asked him the question, who's your mentor? Who's your spiritual father? Who's your confidant? He said, you know, a wise man once told me that, son, you got to become who you're looking for. And my next big moves are all around that, becoming the man that I was looking for, to become the father that I never had, to be the leader that I never experienced, to be that man. There's this guy that is in my mind, in my heart, in my head, and I see him, and it's me 10 years in the future. It's me. It's me leading. It's me, this person that is growing and impacting and serving and growing leaders and helping men out of just craziness and helping them restore life, love, leadership, and legacy. Restore that roar in those 4 areas. And you know, that's what Lions Leading Lions is all about, you know, and that's the next move. It's really an identity thing, to be the man who I've always been looking for.